So in the news, there was this major CIA or intelligence document leak that took place in the United States, where a 21-year-old released documents on the platform Discord that got around. He started leaking these documents last year, and they got around uh, this social media platform. And a lot of the information in the documents contained a lot of information about various countries, the United Nations, and the war in Ukraine. And immediately, one of the things that they tried to focus on to shift people's attention away from some of the more damaging things that were contained in the documents was they tried to focus on things like China and an agreement between China and Russia to provide arms to Russia. They tried to focus on other aspects of the Ukraine war and how certain people were being lenient towards Moscow. Now, the United States was actually surveilling this gentleman, Antonio Guterres, and also his deputy secretary general. And they were secretly spying on them. And the U.S. has been known to secretly spy on leaders. In fact, many countries spy on other countries all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But here it says that the file suggests Washington has been closely monitoring Antonio Guterres. Several documents describe private communications involving Mr. Guterres and his deputy. It is the latest from a leak of secret documents which U.S. officials are scrambling to get to the bottom of. The documents contain candid observations from Mr. Guterres about the war in Ukraine and a number of African leaders. Keyword, a number of African leaders.
Number of African leaders.
Now, what we know so far that has only been disclosed to us specifically is his conversation that led to his thoughts about, or the thoughts about, the African leader, William Ruto, the president of Kenya. Here it says another document from mid-February describes a frank conversation between Mr. Guterres and his deputy, Amina Mohammed. In it, Guterres expresses dismay at a call from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen of Europe to produce more weapons and ammunition as a result of the war in Ukraine. The two also talk about a recent summit of African leaders. Amina Mohammed says that Kenya's President William Ruto is ruthless and that she doesn't trust him. Now, when I initially read this and I saw the name Amina Mohammed, I was thinking that, this was somebody who was an Arab, but of course, Islam is a religion that's very prevalent on the African continent. So there are a lot of African people who also carry the name Muhammad, just like, in the United States, a lot of people who practice Islam with the Nation of Islam carry the name Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
But let's take a look at Antonio Guterres, who's the Secretary General of the UN, and he's Portuguese. Okay. His deputy general that made the statement is this woman right here, Amina Mohammed. And a little bit of a look at her background. She was born in Liverpool, England, to a Haza Fulani Nigerian veterinarian officer and a British nurse. She is the eldest of 5 daughters. So immediately I thought to myself, why is it that whenever we look at how Europeans interact with the African continent and the destruction that takes place behind the agendas that they plan, we always seem to find either an African or someone with some African ethnicity who is a key player in that agenda being successful, bringing negativity towards the African continent, what I would like to call these moles or these corrupt agents or agent provocateurs on the African continent, in the African diaspora, that have a negative impact on African people. And when we look at Amina Mohammed, I haven't really seen much from her track record. that is alarming. Of course, outside of the basic, feminist propaganda. But here you see in the leaked documents that were recovered, she is the one raising the alarm to the European about William Ruto, who just became president of Kenya back in August of 2022. So since his presidency, William Ruto has done a lot of positive things on the continent. And if you remember, he was one of the African leaders who famously had the video go around on social media telling people in Kenya to get rid of the US dollar because that the marketplace will be changing in a few weeks. So no longer do we need an intelligence report where Europeans are saying how they feel about African leaders. Now we have supposedly people who are supposed to be African who blend in very well with the Europeans. This is Wendy Sherman, who is the Deputy Secretary of State of the United States. Sherman, you can already guess with that name who she is and where she comes from. So these people, just like the politicians in the United States who go out and draft bills to sanction African countries who want to work with Russia, the same Negroes in the United States, politicians who vote yes to continue the sanctions against African countries like Zimbabwe. These people who look like us, that we think have our best interests, that are actually working on the behalf and in the favor of Europeans, people that would smile on our face and make us believe that they're doing something positive for African people. Now, here we go to the East African. It talks about a paper thin relationship. So here it says that the comments have revealed a possible paper thin relationship between the UN and Kenya after Dr. Ruto's ascent to power following August 9th, 2022. Aside from dealing with U.S. spy allegations, the UN top brass will have to juggle between handling the embarrassment caused while patching up relations with countries and leaders who may be offended by the alleged comments. On the diplomatic level, where every uttered word counts, Ms. Mohammed's alleged comments may spark a nasty storm, as they could also be interpreted to be the UN stand. So Kenya could take the comments that she made and take it as though this is how the entire UN views Kenya. And of course, the report came out that Kenya was disturbed by these remarks that were leaked in this memo. And here it says that they tried to flip this. Once the remarks came out, they tried to flip it and said that Muhammad's comments were taken out of context. So I don't know how you can say somebody is ruthless and you don't trust them, and that be taken out of, I don't know what other context you could put not trusting somebody in. But here they tried to clean it up and say she has the highest regard for President Ruto and his leadership, adding that she's supposed to be still going to a pre-planned trip to Nairobi later this month to meet with the president. So they're doing damage control over these comments that came out through leaked documents, which if it weren't for the leaked documents, nobody would have ever known. But again, behind the scenes, we're thinking that, these Europeans, we know that the European is working against the favor of African people. But we don't expect our own people to be ringing the alarm or raising doubt about strong African leaders. Essentially, she got spied on by the U.S., but essentially she's being used as a mole and a spy on President Ruto to come back and give her report about him being ruthless or him not being able to be trusted to uphold the agenda, whatever agenda that they have planned.
Okay, let me see if I'm following this. Okay, so the documents leaked by the 21-year-old what National Guard airman, which have been circulating online, as you said, for months. That in of itself, considering that we live in what many people consider to be a national security state where everybody, or not everybody, but most of us who have views that could be considered opposed to the American empire are being spied on. And with the level, first of all, you have, what is it, 15 intelligence agencies. You have the National Security Agency, which can tap into everybody's telephone. And this guy was able to circulate these documents online for months. I mean, what does that say about the United States security? Unless they wanted this to happen. But in
But that was
terms,
one of the things that a lot of other countries were saying when they heard the news about the release, the leaked documents, is they were saying, a lot of countries were saying, we know that the U.S. spies on us, but the unprofessionalism and the lack of security of being able to keep those documents confidential is really what alarmed a lot of these other leaders from all of these countries.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's amazing to us, particularly, like say a person like me who came up in the struggle through COINTELPRO and know personally the extent of the spying of the U.S. government on a person like me who was just a rank and file foot soldier. I mean, I gave a few speeches here or there, I did some organizing, but I'm not, Huey Newton or Fred Hampton or Asada Shakur. But it was always my position from that reality that I got back in 1973 that they leave nothing to chance when it comes to us. But here, these documents were circulating for months.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is incredible. Uh, but in terms, so trying to follow what you said, brother, almost, because I was not aware of this. So they said Guterres was soft on Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So they are essentially criticizing him, and in the process of criticizing him and spying on him, which, like you said, the United States spies on everybody, and there are a lot of countries like the Zionist state and Russia and China, France, England, Germany. They spy on people also. So I mean, there's nothing unusual there. But in the process of spying on the Secretary General of the United Nations, they picked up this comment from the his assistant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Assistant Secretary General or whatever she is. And do we have does it provide the context of the conversation as to why she would label Dr. Ruto, you know, in those terms?
So the context that is mentioned is only what I've seen. I haven't seen the original conversation or the whole conversation or the original document. Because they're looking online, I guess since the leak, they've got a lot of the documents taken back down off of the platform that they were released on. But one of the things she said was that the comments were taken out of context. They weren't sure if the comments were from an official communication or they were from a side conversation.
Hmm.
But essentially, you know, she was critical of him, saying that he was ruthless and she didn't trust him.
Hmm. Well, you and I know, uh, just based on the history, that any person of African descent who rises to a position like that within an organization. There's supposed to be an organization for the global human rights. For global human rights, it's supposed to be a non-biased organization that is driven to maintain peace or intervene and bring about peace. But we've seen how the UN has been used. You know, the UN uh, no-fly zone over Libya in 2011, which then became an excuse for the United States government and other NATO countries, but the U.S. in particular, because the U.S. did more damage than anyone else to bomb the Libyan infrastructure, even the home of Muammar Gaddafi. One day, the Gaddafis were having a family outing, like a cookout, and the NATO sent, I think it might have been some Danish F-16s, and they attacked the family while they were having a cookout and killed one of his sons and two of his grandchildren. I mean, this just shows you how ruthless. This is an organization that's supposed to be about peace, but we know when people of African descent rise to this level of authority or of power within an organization, which fundamentally is an imperialist organization, because the veto powers that the quote unquote five powers have, on the UN Security Council. We know that this has to be a person that's going to be pro the continued hegemony of the NATO U.S. Global power structure.